getting the basics of education, right? And particularly around literacy and numeracy. So 78% of grade 4 children in South Africa cannot read in any language, their own language. Okay, you cannot continue to learn if you do not know how to read. These things are fundamental. That said, I think that interventions at all levels, you can't just leave children now who are grade 8 or grade 10 or grade 12 and we just leave them with nothing. I think it's still worthwhile and it's important to engage at all places. But I really want to touch on the subject of what Albie mentioned earlier around what's remarkable is how we have institutions in South Africa that have managed to stand the test of a whole bunch of things being pummeled from the outside. And often I think we don't think about this, but to have sustainable change, we need institutions that are sustainable, that work, that have people that are excellent in them. Now, in private sector, you're attracting the best people, and yet you're dealing with a few billions of rands. The education budget is 300-something billion rand, and you know how hard it is to attract the best graduates into doing research into the subject or becoming public servants in that area to really strengthen the capacity of institutions. And I just really want to encourage you to think about that. What does it mean to get brilliant people into educational institutions in South Africa? Whether it's teacher training, I mean, this has really been terribly neglected for far too long. You can't win a war without training the army. You're not going to win education in South Africa if you do not capacitate your teachers, and if you do not have the right people, brilliant people in front of to-be teacher candidates, and really capacitating with the skills that they need to be excellent in the classroom. We're going to get nowhere. Think about the institutions, think within government, within departments of education, and not just national, we're talking about provincial level. Do we have brilliant people that can analyze the data? Unfortunately, it often happens that we find ourselves as an institution at Research and Socioeconomic Policy at Stellenbosch having to do work that the state should be doing because there isn't the internal capacity to analyze the data. So you collect all this data, but there aren't people that are trained with the specific skills in economics or education or quantitative methods or qualitative methods to make use of it. Now, it's not right that we should be doing that as an external institution. We need institutional capacity. And can one allocate resources to developing people that will sit in those positions, that will become the future DDGs or HODs of provinces? That's what we need.
Well, the pursuit of brilliance, I think that's a good way to go into where Old Mutual can give your point of view. Kanyisa?
I do think that as the private sector, we do need to look into some of the limiting assumptions that we make about collaborating and partnering with government. I take that some of them are due to experiences and they're not necessarily untrue. But if we want to work differently, we need to revisit the limiting assumptions that we have made around partnerships with government and challenge ourselves to work differently with them. Given has spoken about now being a time where he is seeing a difference in how things used to be, in how government partners with the private sector. So I think we can take that opportunity. The second thing I would like to say for the private sector, which I think links to what you're saying as well, is that we need to also look into and revisit our why do we do development work and why are we funding it. Gone are the days where we think that it's all about getting marketing leverage or mileage, and we need to give ourselves real reasons why change is needed. And so part of funding must be coupled with advocacy, must be coupled with research, it must be coupled with institutional capacity, and we have resources and ways in which we can make that available.
Thank you.
So I think that private companies are doing an amazing amount of work across South Africa, but I am often left wondering just how serious is business about the fundamental transformation that's required in South Africa. And I would like to put that question out there. How fundamental, how radical is business willing to be to get this country on the type of long-term trajectory that ultimately is going to be good for big business and good for the rest of society? And there's some things that business is doing that it's got to stop doing. South Africa has the 5th highest alcohol consumption rate in the world. And not only do we have this 5th highest alcohol consumption rate in the world, but we binge drink the worst, except for Russia and one other country. And the marketing policies and the pricing policies of the alcohol industry are there to promote binge drinking to attract young people into it. What's this got to do with education? What's it got to do with education? We have the highest fetal alcohol rate in the world that is feeding into the system, and we wonder why we can't teach our children. We're not wanting to destroy the alcohol industry. We must reduce binge drinking in this country, and it requires all of us to get together. Secondly, then, there are things that where the private sector is sitting on a gold mine that with very limited additional expense on their part, they could unlock these incredible chokes that we face in South Africa. One is the challenge we know of distributing materials, whether it's early learning materials, reading materials. Only 15% of households, of mothers and fathers, are able to read to their children in the home because they don't have resource materials. Imagine if the distribution companies across the country, the logistics companies, would say, not difficult to put in a box where we have a little bit of spare capacity. DSV and Barrows, I must applaud them, are doing it, but it would be fantastic. It would just open up opportunity, because access to information is a crucial aspect. And there's a third element that I need to describe, and that is that one of probably the single biggest leapfrog strategy in South Africa in terms of overcoming the structural barriers that we have in our country is overcoming the digital divide and using mobile effectively for socio-economic development. Now imagine if all of the network operators were to say, let's zero rate all mobile applications provided by public benefit organizations in South Africa. And we won't have to spend a cent, because we'll offset those costs with our SED funding, also SED obligations, so we can actually get reimbursed. Almost zero cost to company, unlocking unbelievable potential for early childhood development, for job mediation, for educational opportunities, finding ways to address the information asymmetries and the transactional costs that are keeping young people out of the economy and keeping young children uneducated.
Thank you.
It's getting tougher as it goes down.
Yes, I feel like you're literally going to have to sing, but it's the only way to finish this off, right? Good luck, Rooksana.
I think what I want to just do is come down back to basics and to reflect on our humanity. I think we had a fantastic opening keynote speaker in Albisex, and I think he reminded us of the fact that if we can just sort of be human again and respect one another and listen to one another, I think, and share the same values as a society and as a country, all of these things that we want to achieve, bring business to account and bring the NGOs into implementation mode so that they can succeed and reach out and, look at government and say, provide the leadership, this is what we want. And we can continue, and we'll be talking, and there'll be no doing. And again, I just want to remind us of what he said. People are getting impatient. When you have nothing to lose, if you're living in a community and you have no house, and you have no sanitation, and you have no school, it's just not so difficult to go and march down the streets and create chaos, like the situation that we're experiencing with Alexander. I mean, people are impatient. So we can sit here and talk about collaboration and how we're going to talk about each other, but we're not showing any empathy to those people that really need it. So I'd like to leave on that note, that kind of message, that in collaborating, we need to make sure that there are no power games. We need to make sure that every person doing their bit in development is not doing it just for themselves, but for the greater and public good. And that's why you're in development. It's noble to be in that field. It's noble to be in that sector. But you need to do it for the right reasons, not to gain, accolades, or this company is doing the most amount of work because they've invested the most amount of money. So that's just basically what I think we need to go back to basics and ask, why are we doing it? What are we achieving out of it? What do we get out of it? And what impact are we actually making? Are we changing it? The phenomena that we're talking about is not just South African, it's global. The youth unemployment problem that we have is global. We're pushing to drive people into TVET colleges at the moment. None of these young people want to be artisans. They want fancy cars, a cell phone, and a plush home in the suburbs. They want overseas holidays. And yet we're pushing 1.2 billion into TVET colleges. So we're not asking ourselves the basic questions. Why are we doing this? What do we want to achieve? And we're not listening to the youth. We're not listening to what they want. We're not listening to how to be effective and make their lives effective. So I think the common goals, the shared values, and listening to one another before we put these things into practice would take us a longer way to just talking about how we collaborate and what we get out of it, and who looks the best and who's done the most and who's spent the most with the least amount of impact, because that's not what we want to report in our annual reports.
No, thank you.
Thanks.
And finally, given
The pressure.
sing.
Well, for us, it's clear. Education is a societal issue. Where I come from, there's an idiom that says, umuntu ngabantu. It does not take a mother or a father to raise a child, but it takes the entire community to raise a child. And for us to make sure that the education system becomes what we want it to be, it would take all of us in this room. Instead of us pointing fingers and saying, he's not doing this, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, because that would not assist us in bridging the gap of inequality. But we need to make sure that we stand together, and where there's a gap, we fill that gap. Without a doubt, I know for a fact that we will make our education system viable, conducive, proper, and a good one for everybody else. And in so saying, I'd love to say that we believe as a Department of Basic Education that collaborations are the way to go. For us to bridge the gap and to make sure that we strengthen our relationship, for us to be able to implement all the programs that we want to see happening in our system, it takes partnerships. And it's not about the money that you put in. It's not about what value you want to get out, how much mileage you want to get out. It's about the reach. It's about the beneficiary who is the learner. It needs to benefit the learner. That's what we are all about. And I believe that as we are seated in this room, we are going to make sure that our learners are getting the same education. If I may make a reference, what Waterkloof School is getting. Mamelodi High should get the same. And this is the time that we do it. Thank you.
Thank you.